So starting with our strengths, kind of what do we do well, what's unique about who we are, what we do, how we do it, and just kind of start to think about what our strengths are, because those can also then really lend themselves to what do we want to pour our efforts into. Often it's good to like pour effort in something you're already good at, or it's just like, if you're good at something, it's easier to you know move forward in that direction. To then start thinking about, okay, what are these longer term visions, and then in the next year, what do we really want to accomplish? um, so just to get us started, um, what the two questions I want you guys to think about, and then we can do kind of popcorn answering, um, are, what is your very favorite thing about what web monitoring does? Um, and what makes web monitoring unique? Do we fill a niche? How? But what's your very favorite thing, and what makes us unique?
I can start if you want, or we can just take
Yeah.
some time to reflect. Um, so when we had like some like other reflective meetings amongst Edgy earlier in our existence, the thing that I said about website monitoring was it was the closest thing that felt like we're really doing something meaningful that compared to the data rescue events. Like we're seeing direct sort of need, we're seeing a clear sort of workflow, and we are seeing, you know, benefits and tangible results when these reports get published, journalists get them, and they need to, and then the groups that are responsible for these pages and these changes have to account for them. And so, like, I think that's like both something that makes us unique and is also like my favorite thing, because it's that it's not, and I say this knowing that where this work is going is a lot more in the research part. It's like, okay, here's like a task that you can do that we need to have this archive of work, and being able to, create this college and be able to, talk about the changes over a period of time, and then be able to address those in a way that is very direct and very tangible. And so, yeah, I think we do that really well. But it also, it feels like where we were at in sort of some of the larger, when we were reflecting on the data rescue things, where a lot of the members of Edgy who were more academics or more like STS scholars are like, we usually study this stuff, we don't do the archiving. And so there, I feel like we're at kind of a similar moment where, the pace of changes and the amount of changes and sort of the scope of it has changed. And where do we want to focus our efforts more as sort of the context of the work has changed? But without losing the sort of public service of creating these archives and being able to sort of compel, folks who are making these changes to be at least accountable in some form.
Sorry, could you briefly explain the whole data rescue thing?
Oh God. Short version, we were doing all these data archiving events, and that involved a series of workflows and sending things to the Internet Archive and downloading data and putting that in a repository. And we had like 50 of them across the country that were developed by Edgy and some folks at Penn. The amounts depend on who you talk to. And so but that gave us a very direct like contribution. Gesundheit, Gretchen. And again, I can't hear you sneeze, but I can see you sneeze. So like, we had these lists of pages, and we had, these lists of uncrawlable data sets and things like that. It was just like, it was very direct and like, okay, we saved this many URLs to the Internet Archive. We did X, Y, and Z for this. And that it wasn't like a longer term research project that would take months and months and years, like a book or an article. So it was more of that direct contribution, that direct activity to it. So direct action, as you will.
Yeah, I think our work is pretty consistent and also, like you said, direct.
I totally agree. I'll throw in one thing too, is and this is free thought. I haven't reflected and haven't had any time to think this through fully, but I also appreciate the sort of flat nature and the any volunteer type nature of website monitoring, that anyone can come on and make a difference. And that's what attracted me to website monitoring immediately. At the beginning, when I saw Sarah was involved, I saw it as something that I can contribute to the state of things for the greater good, right? So certainly direct, definitely something that anyone could get involved in. And I just love the people that it's attracted. I mean, it's just an amazing network of people who bring so many different opinions, strengths, interests to the table. And it's just an amazing reflection of what a common cause can bring out in a group of people who come from varying walks of life. So that's one of my favorite things about website monitoring. Sorry, Gretchen, I can see you feverishly trying to capture this in notes. I know that's a hard thing to do. I'm happy to pause wherever necessary.
No, you guys are great. I think I captured the essence of those things. Hey,
Yeah.
Kevin.
Hey, I can help take notes if that's useful. Hi, everyone.
Okay. I just wanted to mention another thing I liked is how we're always like trying to streamline the process. Like a lot of our workflow has changed since I entered and joined, and I think a lot of our improvements have been good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to maybe just build on that too, is that we've evolved, right? We've evolved with the times. I think what was born out of an immediate need, and sort of crisis, we set up a foundation that intrinsically is going to have to change as we either gain capacity or more people come on. And that's one of the, again, unique, I think I might put this in the unique bucket, is just like, how hard it's been and how well we've done with sort of building a workflow out of tricky resources, right? There's a lot of manual work. I'm constantly amazed we haven't completely blown up our database somehow, right? So it's cool from that perspective, from an analyst perspective. Then not to mention the work that we've done with Scanner, developing that platform for not for our group's usage and our cause, but being able to then unleash it and allow anybody potentially to use this platform for the same type of common good.
I think those are all totally in line with what folks at the other meeting also shared as strengths of like the kind of diversity of the group, and the commitment of the group. Like, a lot of folks have been, around for a long time, and still like doing the work, and as you said, Justin, the actual like doing of it, and then it's not necessarily an academic exercise, although there can be like interesting academic pursuits from it as well, and that's totally in line. So thinking about these kind of core strengths, and other things that people said in the other meeting were like that no one else is doing this work, especially not at this scale, and that there's so it's there's a both a niche in that, and then also the expansive potential of that as you said with Scanner, like people with interest in all different sorts of areas could use this kind of process and these tools. So thinking about these core strengths, let's do another little like visioning exercise of, say it is November 2020 and we are like on the eve of a very consequential election, and you've been in web monitoring this whole time and you feel like it's been a great use of your time and you're really glad that you've done this for this long. What have we done?
I think so. The two things come to mind. One is a record of work that we can point to through these reports and through this documentation of these changes that we could construct narratives around over the course of the last 2 years now, 4 years then, and see and sort of make some authoritative statements around what has happened. Some of these might be confirming what we already knew, like, yep, they took down a bunch of climate change pages, that makes sense. But I think looking ahead to sort of where the research stuff is going, here are some more subtle trends that we saw, whether these are intentional or not, that we'd be able to see. The other piece of it would be, and perhaps this is leading to questions of Scanner and other people using Scanner outside of the website monitoring group, is that other people could do this too. That, it wouldn't just be us creating these narratives. So that a journalist could go in and look at, this is like, I'm not suggesting we need to build this, but, type in, a term and see how these things changed over time. Like, that's a more specific kind of public service with a specific kind of audience. If we wanted to make these things available and searchable, but however that looks like, other people being able to work with this archive versus just us being able to do that or needing to go through us.
Yeah, I think just to add on to Justin's point, informing the electorate, right, is something that has to be one of, I think, by 2020 is just sort of like, we have been able to obviously get into the news cycle with some pretty amazing pickup from journalists and huge media outlets, but maybe I know this is less part of what website monitoring's sort of remit is, but more of something more edgy wide is, how do we make sure we're getting out there and people are aware of the work we've done, right? So that people have the information. So I don't know, that's just sort of a random thought, but I'm curious how we can at least those who are environmentally conscious or out there, with similar causes, are also aware of what we've done. So how are we networking, with other organizations? And like this weekend is a great example of that. Kevin and I are speaking at a FOIA event at SUNY, and that's an awesome sort of example of how we can get the word out there.
Yeah, I guess I agree with the whole making people more aware of our tools and making them more accessible as well. And so we could like create a guide or whatever so people can apply our tools to other websites, federal or whatever. It doesn't have to be like environmental, I guess, but that's definitely our focus.
And I would kind of like to add, like, I hope we don't have to always be a watchdog forever. I hope the tool can just be, just be interesting to see how website changes, because this is not something that people think about normally. Like, I never even thought about it before I joined this project, like this an evolution of a website, and it just might be interesting to see that in general. Yeah. But that it's just another part of the making it more accessible, like even beyond just like.
Yeah, similarly, I would really like to see us have a really public-facing database with all the changes, but not just the changes themselves, also our analyses of them, and be able to, as Justin was saying, be able to have a database that demonstrates, the, why we say there has been, this kind of nuanced change throughout this agency, and how that may differ from this agency, or how this relates to policies that are in development, and the public information that's available preceding that policy, or following a policy change, how that relates to how that impacts the public information available. So I'd really like to have the actual data in a public-facing database, and then also our analyses of it, and kind of utilize the subject matter expertise within EDGI broadly, and also that we're developing in web monitoring by doing this work. Are there other things we will have done by 2020? Any other lofty visions?
I love the UMich class that Liz brought into the fold too at the beginning of this year. Gosh, time is flying. That would be cool to do again. I think we've talked about it, and I don't think it's like, I think that it's a tricky ask, but I think what that represents is really getting this into the minds of students and people at a young age, and empowering them, connecting them to this network of amazing people and opportunities. Yeah. So I don't know how that would look in 2020, but maybe that's even a shorter term goal. I think that's the next question, right? But
yeah, for sure. One thing that was brought up with related to that for the 2020 visions is just, I think Liz brought it up, the desire to, impact young people's environmental literacy, you know, to enhance their environmental literacy, and you know, recognize that just because it's written on a website doesn't mean that's the whole story, and generally it's not the whole story. um, and just kind of learning more, and I would, you know, expand that beyond young people. But um, in an age of misinformation, I think it's really interesting to think about, you know, the role of websites, and as Kevin was saying, just like how they do evolve, and then how consequential that is. Okay, so
I have to go. Yeah, sorry about that. But
before
nice.
you go, are there any things you want to definitely accomplish by 2020, or sorry, by 2019?
2019, move away from Versionista, I guess, and maybe Google Sheets.
Okay.
It'll probably be easier to like make public databases and stuff with like more, with easier to manipulate formats and stuff. Yeah, that's all.
For sure. Awesome. Thanks so much. It was good to see you, Annie.
Bye, Annie. Oh.
I'm gonna write that down. I do think it's good to transition to the 2019. So we want you know, so 2020 visions are, you know, public-facing database, and kind of, you know, a history of, or a, you know, demonstration of how websites evolve. What's our analysis on it? You know, getting more, you know, more students involved in the mix. So in order to kind of like get down that road, and also really important is what Jake was saying as well, of like, how do we actually get this information out there, truly public, and, you know, to diverse constituencies. What are the things that we like definitely want to do by this time next year, in order to get ourselves on that path?
We have some practical in-house like manpower now, right? So have we hired into this, into sort of a role where I'm sorry if I'm not 100% up to speed on everything, but is a part of the kind of like the kind of edgy facing person basically who's working with other organizations, or, you know, do we have some help there from recent hires, or did I kind of I might have gotten that communication wrong.
That's
but
a
at the
great
same
question.
time, I guess what I'm saying is like, let's have we really tapped out all of the internal potential for socializing the web monitoring project?
I think my internet was foggy there. Could you say again what you mean by socializing the web monitoring project? Sorry.
Well, no, it's a good point. I mean, when I was sort of saying in terms of like getting out our message, working with other organizations who are active in the space, I'm kind of assuming sort of institutionally that we somewhere do that, or at least, you know, sort of have a mandate to, you know, not a mandate, but there's just sort of work being done to get you know, our names sort of marketed amongst a community of volunteers or nonprofits in this area, maybe through our funding, that type of thing. I'm just curious, maybe from Kevin and Gretchen, your perspective.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that's part of my role, and that's why I'm going to the event that we're going on Saturday. So that's, but we are just a few people, and it's hard. There's many responsibilities that's expected of these roles. But I think Gretchen might have some ideas too, because as the project manager for this project, we both thought a lot about outreach between ourselves.
Yeah, I've definitely thought a lot about outreach, and like I would really like to, um, you know, I would really like to do more collaboration with other environmental organizations,
Mm,
like the kind of subject matter organizations, PANA, or either any lots of like EDF, NRDC,
hmm.
any of those. Um, I wouldn't say that we have like a point person hired for that, but I do see it as like um, kind of an integral part of fulfilling our mission of being public facing.
Hmm.
So it's something that's on my radar, that especially because like I think in many ways that like the reports that we write up, I think that other organizations who like specialize in this subject matter would probably be better than journalists at kind of like
Right.
helping contextualize it, like a lot better. um, so yeah,
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, yeah, that's where we've run into a lot of hurdles, right? And well, a lot of trouble, and that is with contextualizing some of the things we found. So almost outsourcing a little bit of that um, corroboration might help.
And that's something where I think that's also a byproduct of the shift in whether it's scope or sort of like what we're looking for. Because now, we aren't looking for removals in the same way that we were in 2017. And it's more about policy changes, that, I think I've seen a lot of things on Slack like, oh, are we tracking the page that, where the science committee changes will be documented? Like it's now we're sort of not necessarily playing catch up, but we're following other kinds of news or news that's already happening and looking for it to be reflected rather than sort of post election. Like we're seeing these pages just go down because we were still in this like data rescue mindset. And so how to, I think this is where, whether it's with like the EPA conversation stuff or this is with Science to Action, where, we are looking more for the policy changes or partnering with people who are already working on this. I'm thinking of the sage grouse stuff. People have already spent years and years working on this. Like, what are we adding to their work by like writing this report that they don't already know? Or is it something where we collaborate with them to say, you're writing this already, we've got this information, that how would this be helpful? But and then or do we think of like the longer term stuff and looking at the term analysis and these larger trends, so that we're not just we're not in that sort of older mindset of waiting for things to get removed, because it just doesn't seem like that's happening as much. And if we keep trying to do that, we're going to miss out on other kinds of opportunities for collaboration.
such a good point. I think that's the real question of like we've got you know we've got a certain capacity, and where do we want to be spending that time? Is it the um is it writing reports? Is it building a database kind of based on what our analyst sheets and important changes doc looks like? Is it the broader analysis? Is it more like case studies in partnership with an organization that has that subject matter expertise, like um, or is it a combination of these things? And if so, like how and what? I do think that parts of those can be kind of symbiotic. Um, I guess that sort of leads to the next question to help us get back to this question of like what would be energizing for you personally to work toward, kind of maybe even regardless of if you think that's what web monitoring should be working toward as a whole for this next year, but what would be specifically energizing to you?
I always just come back to like what's the more direct outcomes. I think that's what I always come back to. You know, we're all working places that are full of bureaucracies and things like that, and to be able to feel like we're contributing something very directly is a really powerful feeling. And so I think that goes back to sort of like the collaborations with the, you know, EDF or these other groups that we are specifically partnering with them on these projects and figuring out a way that this work, you know, like it, I guess there would be two things. One is we're building this sort of archive and some various levels of interactivity with it so that people can do this work and think about this in terms of a more like a library mindset where we're collecting a bunch of stuff in order to make it available for people to use, or and maybe these aren't mutually exclusive, or we look at these very specific issues that are coming up that we know about. We're not, you know, I don't think there's anything that would, I shouldn't say this. What I'm thinking about saying is there's not anything that would really surprise us at this point in like seeing a change happen on a site. Like, I think we know enough about what this administration is trying to do. And so I think we have a good sense of the issues and the things that they're trying to do. And if we're trying to like catch them doing something versus trying to be more of an advocacy or able to contribute to people who are already working on these issues, I could see both of those possibilities being energizing. The latter because the former because it's very familiar to me as a librarian, but then the latter because it goes to, you know, aligning with specific sort of causes and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things that jumps to my mind that is worth just maybe mentioning is that, you know, in the early or the older mindset, there was sort of that direct feedback mechanism, which was, holy crap, we're making the news cycle, right? And we're getting a lot of exposure, and you know, for some people that's exciting, maybe not everybody, but you know, that's something as we shift to sort of the more research oriented work that I think we've lost a little bit of. We also in previous well, up till a few months back, we had direct feet on the ground in DC, right, that were actually involved with stakeholders in our government and were publicizing and sharing our work, and that was seeing real impact, right, in some of the letters that were being sent by actual senators to the administration. So those things are really cool, right? Those are examples of our work having, real tangible results. So it's a really tough. This is a really key question, because I find that this could be an area of potential struggle for us in keeping people interested, not only who are currently here but prospectively here. So for me, personally, I would like to make sure we don't lose that, or think about, I don't, again, I haven't had a lot of time to think this through thoroughly, but, some way in which we are still kind of, I don't want to say that, we're still producing this, but still trying to figure out what tangible results we're going to get out of it. And again, I kind of continue to kind of come back to a greater link to broader, edgy work that's being done, where there's opportunity for this, right? There's a lot of career environmental scientists and career, teachers and all sorts of people involved in the organization that I think could perhaps be a feedback loop for some of the work that we do. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I'm curious what if that how that rings for you guys.
By the like other folks in broader edgy being a feedback loop, do you mean like kind of vetting findings and then sharing with edgy and seeing what kind of contextual analysis this could lead to or not, maybe it's just kind of some and then kind of in partnership figuring out where and how to disseminate it and kind of in what package.
Exactly. Right. And this is coming from somebody, from me, who has really no background in this arena. Right. And would like to know, as I put in volunteer hours, that, that it is actually impactful work, that I don't have expertise other than, the staying current really with the news, and a very limited background in sort of environmental science education. But that's just with the thought of going back to that unique aspect of website monitoring, that it really can attract anybody to do the work.
Yeah, totally. And in that way can really be for those interested, because we do have such a reservoir of environmental science, policy, and history expertise, it could really be a sort of like a professional development opportunity in some ways to work with folks that have that expertise, if that's a kind of expertise that you personally are looking to grow.
I think it's amazing, Annie's story, for example, that I don't know the details of it, but from what I've heard, sort of anecdotally, is that she's interested in getting involved in the dev work, right, as a computer science student. So it's that those types of connections are awesome for volunteers to make.
Yeah, agreed.
What else? Out of curiosity, Gretchen, what did the first session sort of uncover for energizing the initiative?
A lot of folks really centered around this kind of public facing work and wanting to make sure that we weren't doing all this monitoring and cataloging without it going somewhere. And if the only parts of it that are public facing are newsworthy reports every kind of less and less often, that feels hard, but that as big changes kind of slow down, doing more of this kind of comprehensive work, like the term analysis that Eric is doing, and I'm really interested in kind of those patterns and themes across agencies, or comparing different agencies, those sorts of analyses that we can start to do because we just have such a long record now, seem to be really appealing to people, and having Scanner be public facing That was a real drive. There were a bunch of dev folks at the last one, and they were really eager and excited about that. And then I think the other thing that was really sweet to hear, and I think it is really meaningful, was also just like that we're all still here. Like, this has been a committed group for a long time, and it's really fun to like see this, familiar faces every week, and like, and however much time we spend talking about, our personal lives kind of at the either end of the meeting, just kind of like know these people, and you feel a part of a team. And I think that's
Totally.
really valuable.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. 100%.
That's definitely like across all of Edgy too, not just within web monitoring, which is amazing.
But yeah, where we kind of ran out of time last time was, and kind of we're at a similar point today of like, it does seem like there's a real common, like strong common thread of like wanting this work to be public, wanting, the data sets to be public, wanting the analyses to be public, wanting Scanner to be public. And then the question is like, how much, what kind of % of our resources are we going to devote to these different aspects? Like what, of doing the monitoring, and just kind of making sure we have this broad database, and, who's going to put in the time for, synthesizing these findings and, seeing kind of what patterns emerge from it. Those are, and those seem like the two avenues, but then also doing the reports and having kind of not just the 30,000 foot view of analyses, but also for certain changes that like this sage grouse, which I know, Justin, I'm just I'm sorry, working on it. But it, like, that's a, like the kind of synthesis involved in that, to making the changes there really digestible, to understand kind of the breadth of those changes is also really important, and isn't, it's not adequate to just like have it as a single row in a spreadsheet. But it's just the division of labor, or of capacity, being given to each of those is, I think, the real challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I think where we have definitely also like come across roadblocks, as we know, is that capacity, right? We've got sort of frontline, and then once you kind of get past that frontline monitoring work, there's where you start to run into where people just don't have that capability, whether it's report writing, research, and I think we were sort of trying to structure ways in which we could get those two projects kind of in an easier place where people could pick up slack and decrease slack, but it wasn't ever kind of. And I think, Gretchen, the work we've done to remove some of the work on that front line is huge, and now we need to sort of bulk back up, I think, in terms of maybe whether it's new boots on the ground with an outreach for new volunteers or what. But I think energizing the team with some fresh faces might be good to see in the short term, near term, as well.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and especially now that we kind of have this new system down and it seems to be working, and yeah, and because there are folks who want to roll off of the monitoring work to focus solely on the synthesis work, but we need more people to be able to fill those domains, and so it was important to have this conversation before reassigning domains, because we also right now need to streamline them. Maybe we can expand them. Hopefully we can expand them again with a bigger team, but I think we're going to have to downsize for, at least the short term. So 2019 goals. With the former, in the first meeting, it was the kind of main goals. Here, I'll pull it up so I can say the words right. The main goals were sticking together, both keeping our group's commitment and integrating new recruits, stepping back and synthesizing, to kind of make use of our data set as a whole, and coming to a happy place with Scanner, including greater accessibility in terms of public demonstrations and wider user base, and also in terms of improving analyst efficiency. Rob was saying he has a goal of having analysts be able to do twice as much work in the same amount of time, with by the end of 2019.
That sounds awesome.
Do those sound like goals, like goals that feel good to you guys, or is there another one of like building a database, or like what motivates you reflected in those?
Yeah, I think maybe breaking down the stepping back and synthesizing goal might be helpful, i.e. like what do you, I mean, kind of just like breaking down what you mean by that. Like, are we going to be more selective with what type of reports we want to generate? Are those going to build into a bigger theme that we're approaching, rather than just sort of firing off whatever we find, even though I know we are finding changes slow down. So is that going to mean looking back and trying to, which of course we are with some of Eric's work, but what are some of the things underneath stepping back and synthesizing that we're gonna, that are gonna kind of build an approach to kind of achieving that goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the key question.
So, and I hate to do this, Christian. I do have to jump. I don't know if you had a
Same here.
couple more things on the agenda. I'm assuming you'd want to maybe put something on to get to the did not discuss how we accomplish these things.
Well, and it ended at the same point last time too. So I think another meeting of that, but and also the Zoom line is being used in 4 minutes too. So.
Oh. Awesome.
But thank you guys so much for meeting today and sharing your ideas. And I do think that that's the exact next step, is breaking down and really discussing what do we mean by stepping back and synthesizing, and how do we do that? Because we need a solid database to be able to do that. So
cool. Look forward to it.
Thank you for this. This is great.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
See you guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Kevin, thanks for taking notes. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Do you need to sync up on anything while we're on the line? Do you want to stop recording?
Oh, good point. I'll do that. I'll stop recording. Yes.